right, the first question that just picked up is who named the time, or the zodiacal time, Pisces? The answer is Enki. As Nibiru approaches the sun, it should become visible to the naked eye as only as a bright point of light. That is correct. How many years out of the 3600 would Nibiru be visible from Earth? The observations reported in Assyria and Babylon for the previous time, or last time it was here, started between a century to 2 centuries before its perigee. The story of Enki that I translated from tablets. Where are those tablets now? Oh, they're all over various museums in England, at the Louvre, in Germany. Many are in Philadelphia, by the way. So they are all over. The sources for the book, Lost Book of Enki, were about 800 different texts and fragments and etc. In recent years, other Pluto-sized bodies have been discovered beyond the orbit of Pluto. Why didn't the Anunnaki tell the Sumerians about these bodies as well? I don't know. With such an extreme orbit, why isn't Nibiru a frozen planet, unable to sustain life? Well, that's really a very important question, because it keeps being asked. And the answer can begin with saying, why aren't we on Earth frozen? If we go up, not just in a plane, but certainly in an orbiting spacecraft, just a few miles above the surface of the Earth, we'll be frozen to death. So why aren't we frozen to death on the planet here? Because of our atmosphere. It's the atmosphere that keeps the heat. Now, most planets, and there are many studies, including very recent ones in the journal Science and Nature, about Jupiter. Jupiter, as an example, not only has internal heat from radioactive and other elements in the planet, but actually emits more heat out into space than it ever receives from the sun. So if a planet has its own natural internal heat, as virtually all the planets have, the question is, does it have an atmosphere? If it doesn't have an atmosphere, life would not be possible. Everything would freeze. If it has an atmosphere, it creates like a hothouse effect. And this was really the reason why the Anunnaki came here, because they were losing their atmosphere, and without finding a way, which was with gold, to protect it, life would end on their planet. So this is a key question, and although I've given the answer in my books and at every possible occasion and meeting, etc., it's kept being asked, but it gives me an opportunity to give the reason and the explanation. Well, it's another question more or less in the same vein. In Israel,
How trying for Tammuz in Muslim?
Well, it is not something I talked about today, but the question is, how long did the women in Israel, ancient Israel, cry for Tammuz, which was the name for the Sumerian god Dumuzi, who was killed, or his death was caused by his older half-brother Marduk. And it's a very interesting story, because it was supposed the two clans tried to make peace by intermarriage, and the goddess Inanna, better known as Ishtar, was betrothed to Dumuzi, a son of Enki. I don't know for how long, but certainly the reference in the Bible is at the time of the prophet Jeremiah. So this is 6th or so century BC. After all the information you discover, do you believe in God? Well, if you can define God, I could answer that. It's a good question, but it's very complex to answer unless the question is developed. Is it just a history book? Religion?
Yeah, he wants to put the topic.
Or is religion just a history book lesson? Or is there any merit to any of them, to all religions? Well, religion, in the narrow sense, began, like so many other things, in Sumer, which was the worship of the Anunnaki, gods with a small g. And then it diversified to national gods and to clans. Those who followed Marduk, those who followed Sin, those who followed Enki. They were given Egyptian names. They let people do the miracles. They were called Quetzalcoatl. So religion, I think, can be separated at least into two parts, probably into more. One is the one of ritual. You do this, you don't eat that, etc., which just developed over the ages and doesn't really, is not basic to faith. And the other is faith, in believing that there is some higher entity, and this leads to the question of God. I do believe that there is a universal creator. If any religion teaches that, then it's a valid religion. Phobos appears artificial. Your comments on our moon. Oh, I should give comments on our moon. Is our moon artificial? No, our moon is not artificial. There's a whole part of the epic of creation. I skipped over it, but how the moon came to the celestial entity called in the text Kingu, how it became our moon. So it's not artificial. What do you think Anunnaki plans are for us on their return? Well, it depends who the leader now is, because the attitudes were different at the time of one of its nearing, when the great flood or deluge occurred. Enlil wanted to use the opportunity to wipe mankind off the face of the earth. Enki, who treated mankind more like his creations, because he and the goddess Ninhursag were involved in the genetic engineering, treated us more as, not us, but humans, as his creatures, his responsibility. So it all depends who is coming back now. If we go back to the events of the deluge, in the Bible, the reason is given that Yahweh, the biblical God, who was Yahweh, is another subject. I do have in my book, I think, Divine Encounters, a whole chapter about, it's titled God the Extraterrestrial. And if it strikes you as odd, then by definition, if he's not one of us, then he's an extraterrestrial. So the Bible says that Yahweh, the antagonistic deity, which in the Sumerian text is Enlil, said mankind turned out to be evil, and therefore it should be wiped out of the face of the earth. And if the Anunnaki come back, whoever they are, will they find evil upon the earth? And no doubt they will. So if these are the Enlilites who are coming back, they'll say, how about repeating the deluge? In the Akkadian text, the Babylonian version, the reason was that there were too many. Not that they were evil, but these creatures, the children of the Adam, there are too many of them. They fill up the earth. They are in our way, you know. They don't give us peace. So, are there too many of us on earth? Maybe. So, I don't know. I think the best way to find out is to be around when they come back. Are you training others to read the tablets? No, I have no time for that, but one can learn. It's not impossible. We have another half hour. Do you know from the interpretation of the tablets if Earth is the only planet they visited to mine for gold? Well, they definitely visited Mars, but if the question is limited to mining for gold, there's no text that I know of that says so. So we might be the only golden planet. Has anyone tested the black residue seen on the walls of the inside of the space platform? Well, some of the walls are blackened, but I don't know of anyone testing it. Maybe one should go back and do it. Yeah. When Enki was living on Earth, did he experience Nibiru's crossing? Many times. Do you feel that what's going on in Iraq is influenced by the knowledge of the eventual return of the Anunnaki? Well, there's a question full of landmines, and I'll risk it by saying yes. Why do you think NASA and our government, I thought that NASA is part of our government, is so afraid to admit the truth about Mars? Well, that's a question in general. I've not shown today, I think. I showed it yesterday, the VA-243. I showed it today? No, yesterday. Well, there is a cylinder seal in the Museum of the Ancient Near East in Berlin that depicts, it's called a mythological scene because it shows the god of agriculture granting the plow to mankind at the beginning of agriculture. And as often happens on other cylinder seals, the background is decorated with celestial images. And on that particular seal, catalogued as VA-243, there is a depiction of a solar system with a sun, a star in the center, surrounded by planets. And when I compared it to what we know about our solar system, it shows exactly our solar system up to and including Pluto, referring to a previous question, in the correct order, the correct sizes, etc., plus one more planet, which is the Nibiru that comes and goes. So I obtained from the museum a photograph with permission to print it, and wrote about it in the 12th Planet and some subsequent books as well. That this is our solar system. In the course of the years, astronomers, members of the establishment, were shown by people like you this particular part of my book in the cylinder seal, and it's in the museum, and it's known where it was found, and it's known that it's from around 2500 BC, almost 4,500 years ago, and astronomers were asked, so what is it? One case, which is not the part I wanted to tell you, well, I'll tell you that part too, but one instance was, and I get a fax about it, one astronomer, a well-known astronomer, a respected astronomer, who was shown that, says, well, this is definitely a depiction of a solar system, a star, a sun surrounded by planets. But there's no way that the Sumerians, as Sitchin claims, 4,500 years ago could depict it, that they knew it. So what is it? So therefore, it must be of a depiction of another solar system. And I get the fax with this answer by this astronomer. And I took the fax and wrote on the margin, wow, wow, wow. Does he realize what he just said? He said, there's no way the Sumerians could be familiar with our solar system. But they were aware of and could depict another solar system which may or may not exist somewhere. So when this was shown to him, he realized that he said a stupid thing, and he eventually wrote a book and devoted a relatively nice chapter to me. But that was in the book, published in 76. And then, a couple of years ago at the most, maybe a year and a half ago, one of my dear friends, I think she's in the audience. Joanne, are you there? Okay. Sends me pages from a very respected, or the most respected, astronomy magazine in the United States, with an article, and the picture of the cover of the 12th planet is right there as part of the article. You know, we now have posters duplicating that original cover. And the article is written by one of the leading astronomers in the United States, in this city, in Los Angeles. And he explains pretty fairly what I say. I say that this is a depiction of the sun and the missing planet is Nibiru. It's fair. But he says, since all this is really impossible, so how about a different understanding that the central figure that I say is the sun, what looks like a star, that maybe it's the planet Jupiter. And Jupiter is surrounded by a number of moons, so maybe this is Jupiter surrounded by this. And the way it is laid out, he said, this is a depiction of Jupiter passing through the teapot of Sagittarius. The constellation Sagittarius, which, is depicted like others, with lines drawn, which is not really the way it's in the skies, but that's how it was envisioned. So there's part that if you connect the planets, the dots this way, then the British astronomers, maybe while having 5 o'clock tea, called it the teapot. And they said, so this is Jupiter, he says in a 3 or 4 page article, passing through the teapot of Sagittarius, and therefore what Sitchin says, that this is the sun and our solar, doesn't have to be the way he says it. And I get this. I read it. I say, maybe I'm wrong. And the next day, I wake up and I say, there's something wrong with what this guy says. Jupiter passing through the teapot of Sagittarius. Now Sagittarius, as I've learned, because I had to learn some astronomy for writing these books, Sagittarius is more to the south of the ecliptic, in the plane, the line through which the planets move. And some of the planets, they diverge a little. Jupiter moves almost precisely along the ecliptic. I go to my astronomy books, of course. Jupiter never moves south enough to touch Sagittarius. But maybe I'm wrong. So I wrote 2 letters, one to the astronomical people in New York and one in Chicago. And I didn't say why I'm asking, but I said, is it possible for Jupiter to pass through the teapot of Sagittarius? And I got back letters, very nicely responded, saying absolutely no, never, never, never. With these 2 letters, I write to the magazine, Sky and Telescope. And I say, reference this and this. This astronomer is wrong, and I would like you to print a correction. Nothing. Not until I threatened some legal action did I hear back, not from the magazine, they never published a correction. But from this astronomer, I get a 2-page letter that says, "Dear Zechariah, I've been admiring your writings, from the day you were born, blah, 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 blah. Now, as to the point you make, maybe I was too hasty in saying it's Jupiter. But still, I don't agree with your interpretation of the cylinder seal." So I wrote back to him and said, you don't have to agree with me on this, but I would really like to understand what is the problem that astronomers or other establishment scientists have with accepting the truth of this Sumerian information. What is the problem? Is it a religious problem? Do you have religious problems? Is it an academic? Is it a scientific? I just want to understand, and this is in answer, the short answer to the question. I never get an answer. Nobody of those who say, nobody ever explains why. Some of them, the so-called Assyriologists, because I used to attend some of the meetings of various societies of which I am a member until I stopped, come to me and say, "Of course you are right, but I cannot say so." So, is it that they are afraid for their academic standing? Are they afraid to be made the laughingstock of their colleagues? I don't know. The answer is, I don't know. It does not make sense to me. And when it will end, when this attitude will end, I don't know. I really think that the mass of people who do accept the real truth will force the establishment to change its position.